Well, howdy, partner. And welcome back to Bumblebee. I'm your host, Kyle McWaters.
And I'm Taylor McWaters.
And this week we're looking at the Wild Wild West, and unfortunately, 10 ways you could die there. Yeah, sorry. Number 10, diseases. Dude, I had a toothache the other day, swelled up immediately. I would never have lasted in this era. Unfortunately, it wasn't called the mild West. And when people were sick, they got sick, like sick. For instance, cholera, shared along the Mormon and Oregon trails, killed loosely 6,000 to 12,000 people on their way to the California gold rush between 1849 and 1855. It's believed that more than 150,000 Americans died during the two pandemics from 1832 to 1849. Yo, that is terrifying. So not only do you have to dodge bears and root canals, just washing your face in the local popular stream could get you, huh? The Great Plains smallpox pandemic killed more than 17,000 Native Americans within its first few months of being there. The American Fur Company's steamboat pulled up and got off, coughed a bunch of times, and then people just unfortunately started dropping. There was never an official death record as smallpox decimated the Americas when it arrived, both way back from the Spanish and then again from up north with the fur trade. Sneezing, coughing, everywhere, just cover your mouth, guys, you know?
Number 9, kicked by a horse. Yeah, we've heard about this at some point in history, but did it actually happen? Like, how often was somebody just and then that's it? Turns out getting kicked in the head by a horse back in the 1800s was like getting in a car accident. It happened pretty often, my friends. Yeah, it's pretty sad. Bill Pickett. Just sounds like a Western man right off the hop. Bill Pickett was born in the late 1870s. He invented something called the bulldogging practice, which is to jump from the back of a horse onto a wild steer. Yeah, like you're Woody from Toy Story, just doing a heist, just jumping from one thing and leaping to the other. Crazy. While your hat's still on your head, somehow, no idea. And there's many that attempted this and ultimately failed. Yeah, you can't wrestle a wild animal and then live to tell about it often. I've read it. Yellowstone National Park is apparently a hotspot. This guy sends me a link the other day. Yellowstone National Park, man gored in front of family. I'm like, okay. But even Bill Pickett himself got trampled and stomped to death in 1932. Holbrook Lynn, a Broadway star from the late 1800s, also met their fate from a horse accident. Malcolm Baldrige Jr., an American politician from the late 80s, rodeo accident. Yeah, brutal way to go.
Number 8, wildlife. The Wild West was a pretty harsh time. If you were lucky enough to enjoy some peace and quiet away from the saloons and bathhouses and spend some time outdoors with the family, well, then you had to be pretty careful. I mean, I guess most of the time people were outside, you know, fresh air, birds chirping, and of course an array of vicious and deadly predators, overpopulated and hungry. Dude, the grizzlies are named after the grizzlies, right? Like imagine all those horses you had to wrangle, or the gators of the south just waiting for you to take a leak. Or pecked to death by these huge birds of prey. If you didn't have a rifle on you, something could get you. And that's all during the day. At night, laying on the ground on like a rolled up t-shirt, scorpions and coyotes. What were the bugs like? No muskole back then, just waking up stung to absolute by everything with legs? Don't even get me started on the snakes. Living in your boots or hat? I'm a pretty outdoorsy guy, but god damn.
Number 7, the gallows. We've mentioned the gallows many of times here on Bumblebee. It's almost like humans are consistently cruel throughout history or something like that. Odd. When it comes to meeting your fate in the Wild West, it sounds horrible to say, but with the rest of this list coming up, at least being hanged was fast. You know what I mean? And in the case of Tom Blackjack Ketchum, it was historical in a historically awful way. After a train robbery gone awry, or as I've said for 10 years, Ori, Tom Ketchum was held in prison until his date with the gallows arrived. But while waiting in prison, this man gained weight. The guy was eating good. He weighed around 200 pounds by the time of his demise. And dark detail here, but his body was so heavy when he was hanged that his head just kinda, you know, I don't want to say anything here on YouTube, but like his head, that's all I'll say, just.
Number 6, topicals. If we know anything about doctors from history, is that sometimes they didn't get it right. Most of the time, super helpful, and then like sometimes, yeah, I have a cough, here's some ammonia. Come on, you can trust me. Just call me Doc. You know what I mean? Doctors in the mid 1800s, wild west times were just like jarring and bottling everything up. Everything had a remedy. There were coaches that would just sell topicals and ailments. Hair loss? Here you go. Sore legs? Here you go. Tuberculosis? Ooh, yeah, sorry son, that's gonna kill you. We don't have a cream for that one. And tons of painkillers, of course, like opiates, morphine. Everyone's running around jonesing with cold sweats. Basically, you could just pull up to a remedies wagon and ask for either cocaine syrup or cannabis fluid or opium needles and be on your way. Every elixir, cure, and potion. This time literally went from medieval root canals to widespread vaccines in like 60 years. Cocaine leaves for headaches? Ooh, I'll take that one, please.
Number 5, weather. Weather, you want to believe it or not.
Try again.
Back in the 1800s, obviously weather was a major factor, as it is today. Hailstorms, lightning, high winds. When you're a cowboy, this all sucks even more, honestly. Especially the opposite, when it's dry and humid for weeks at a time. Check this out. Wooden wagon wheels would actually shrink because of the heat. So they had to be soaked overnight just to prevent the iron rims from falling off during your commute during day hours. Yeah, it was so dry the wagon wheels needed water. Yeah, sorry I'm late, my wagon wheels were a little thirsty. Yeah, I had to wait for them to soak up some fun. I can't even drive a car downtown without having a panic attack today, let alone rubbing axle grease on my dry lips, waiting for my wheel to drink water.
Number 4, gangs. If you've played the Red Dead Redemption series, then you've probably held up a train or two. Some of the posses that were famous at the time actually did that though, and weren't so nice about it. The American West was made up of criminal outfits, usually a gang or a posse, involving members who would just live and ride and rob together with. Jobs were scarce, and it seemed that it was just a little easier to just demand what you want and then enjoy the birth of all the media attention after, making some, quote, famous. An obsession, the cowboy culture, the outlaw criminal. Some of them include Billy the Kid's gang, the High Fives gang, and the Oklahombres. That's a good one. Artists were getting better at the time, and people were sketching wanted lists for local sheriffs. These posters would be calling cards for these guys. They kept them, put them in their pockets as souvenirs. Charles E. Bowles, also known as Black Bart, held up a total of 28 stagecoaches without ever being caught, and even had the reputation of being a gentleman about it too, emptying strong boxes but never actually shaking down the passengers. There were even reports that he would even leave verses of poetry behind. Guy's a smooth criminal, huh?
Number 3, the night after. I'm sure the Wild Wild West was wildly lonely. Definitely, this isn't news. Like Kyle said, we've played Red Dead Redemption, just wandering around alone. Sometimes you need more than a train heist, right? Sometimes you need love. Even if you have to pay for it with railroad bonds or whatever. Saloons have all the things a lone traveler could want, including STIs. Great, how much is, great, debit. We'll just pay for all this in one swift tap, I guess. The famous Wild Bill Hickok, okay? He had a rough go. Guy had some troubles after a few saloons, okay? He was dipping around in a few bars and yeah. Alexander Fleming wasn't born until 5 years later in 1881, so penicillin wasn't around to save any cowboys at this time.
Number 2, battles. The archetype of the Old West period is generally accepted by historians to have occurred between the end of the American Civil War in 1865 till about 1890. The American frontier, also known as the Wild West, is the geography, history, folklore, and culture associated with the American expansion mainland that settlers started in the 17th century and ended in 1912. This era, giving rise to the expansionist attitude known as manifest destiny, which was the belief that Americans were supposed to travel and expand west. But with that came a lot of conflict. You can't just waltz in and throw up a house when someone else lives there already, you know? Years of warring tribes and bands, colonist battles, ego-filled duels, and the aggressive pillaging of land stolen took countless number of lives. Yeah, countless, like we'll never actually know the accurate number. Roughly 750,000 lives were lost in the Civil War. Yeah, nasty stuff.
And finally, number 1, Helena Duels. Beginning, of course, in Helena, Texas, Helena Duels were violent, awful. This activity came from what was then the toughest town on earth. And again, this is back in the late 1800s, so what that even means, I can't even compare. The Helena Duel began here. There's even a movie called The Duel with Woody Harrelson and Liam Hemsworth. It's not a great movie, but it's a history lesson in itself. A Helena Duel puts our opponents' left hands tied together, right? They're just tied together with buckskin or something that smells awful, and you have to just fight each other using one arm. Now, of course, in Western fashion, there was a weapon or two involved that I don't want to get too deep into on YouTube, so it got pretty gory, it got pretty violent. The only rule here was that they can't bleed too much. Awesome, that's a great fun rule, like whipping that one out on Saturdays. Hey, no one bleed too much or else, then we gotta stop. I thought UFC was brutal, let alone a Helena Duel starring Liam Hemsworth, of all people. Really?
If we were in a posse, I'd call us the Bumble Boys.
That's nice.
I don't know, it sounded way tougher in my head.
We'll work on it. It's okay.
Yeah. I'm Colin McWaters.
And I'm Taylor McWaters,
And we'll see you next time on
Bumble
Bumblebee.
Boys. I thought
The
you said
Bumble
the
Bumble Boys?
Make up your mind.
We're the Bumble Boys.
We're off. The rule is you gotta ride on an invisible horse.
Alright.
That's the rule.